Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Sarah Walco. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey. And we're really thrilled to host this program tonight in partnership with the Film Society of Summit, who we do a lot of public programs with, and we're always really grateful to work with. So first I want to start this program that's saying, while we are gathered on Zoom, Lisa Resnick, who is the founder of the Film Society of Summit, and Mary Birmingham, who is a curator who's going to be leading the discussion tonight, and myself are physically located on various places in New Jersey, which is the ancestral homeland of the Lenape peoples. I would like to acknowledge and pay deep respect to Lenape people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. I also want to thank the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, who's generously funded all of our exhibition-related programs, which this discussion tonight is a part of, connected to our exhibition in our main gallery, The First Water is the Body. This exhibition features the work of 16 artists that belong to and operate in relation with Indigenous communities across the US and Canada. Also, the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey formed an advisory committee to help with the vision, scope, and content of this program. So we just want to thank the panel that included Diane Farrar, who is Osage and Cherokee, filmmaker and founder and director of Amarinda. David Martine, who is Shinnecock and Montauk, director, curator of the Shinnecock Nation Cultural Center and Museum, Shinnecock Reservation. And Dennis Redmoon Darkeem, who is Yamasee Creek Seminole, Native American. He's an artist and an educator. So it was through the advisory of that panel that really helped guide us in a lot of our programming. Just want to say thank you to them. So we're here tonight to discuss Conscious Point. It's a film that explores the roots of American inequity, greed, and pollution. And this documentary, about a decades-long battle for preservation by the Shinnecock Indian Nation, raises questions of land ownership, environmental use, and income inequity in Southampton. It contrasts the values of those for whom beautiful places are a commodity, who regard land as raw material to be developed for profit and pleasure, and the locals for whom the land means community, belonging, heritage, and home. So we're excited to welcome Trevor Warmfeld, who's the director, editor, producer, writer of this film. Treva is an award-winning filmmaker, and Conscious Point, the film in discussion tonight, won the Victor Rabinowitz and Joanne Grant Award for Social Justice, which is an award presented at the Hamptons International Film Festival for a film that exemplifies the values of peace, equality, global justice, and civil liberties. It was also included in the Native Cinema Showcase at the National Museum of the American Indian, the Princeton Environmental Film Festival, the Martha's Vineyard Film Festival, and many more. And it was featured on PBS's Independent Lens series in 2019. We're also really thrilled to welcome Becky Hildenia, who is the Shinnecock activist, central subject of the film. And her story brings to light evidence of a great imbalance of power in the Hamptons that consistently points to land use decisions favoring the wealthiest residents, often at the expense of the environment. Her story reveals a community under tremendous stress, and one that has suffered from the repeated colonization of their land and way of life since 1640 and continues to watch the desecration of a place that is very sacred to them. Becky has been a central figure standing up to the Southampton town government, preserving Shinnecock sacred land and pushing legislation to protect ancestral grave sites. So we're really thrilled to welcome them tonight. Just want to do a really quick housekeeping. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat, either throughout the discussion or at the end. We'll also welcome if you want to raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask your questions as well. And I am going to share my screen and now pass the evening over to our curator, Mary Birmingham.
Thank you, Sarah. So this film discussion is one of a series of public programs related to our current show that Sarah mentioned, The First Water is the Body, which looks at the interconnectivity of land, water, and body. Are we, do we have the, okay, thank you, sorry. You can just leave the slide and I will tell you when to advance it, thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So the exhibition takes its title from a poem by Natalie Diaz, published in her book, Post-Colonial Love Poem. The work in the exhibition is a visual complement to the poem, which accepts the body as the human form of water, and that the fate of water is the fate of all people. The exhibition is curated by Maria Hupfield, an artist, educator, and member of the Anishinaabe Nation from Wasauksing First Nation, Ontario, Canada. So Sarah, if I could just have the overview of the gallery, thanks. The show includes photography, video, sculpture, ceramics, basketry, beadwork, and textiles by 16 Indigenous artists and makers from across North America. They are all working to shift cultural perspectives and awaken solidarity with land and water. I'm going to show you just a few images from the show, especially since they touch on some of the same topics we're discussing tonight. I encourage anyone in the area to please visit, and those of you who are at a distance, you can see these images on our website. So I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly and not stop and talk about all of the artists. So we have a partial view of the gallery. You can next one, please.
Yeah, you wanted to have the ones of the water lines beaded and the Schwann Quick-to-See Smith? Yeah,
that's some of the work in the show. Okay. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview. So the next one, this is two works of art that are related to the Red River. On the wall is a beaded river that's 300 inches long that represents the Red River by Carrie Allison. Next one. This is all done with little seed beads and traditional beading methods, but she's really taking it in a whole new direction. Next. And also this is a basket by Shan Gosshorn, late Cherokee basket maker. And this piece is called This River Runs Red. And it features a traditional Cherokee weaving pattern of the basket, but on all of the splints on the basket, which are made of paper, are the names of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls from Canada and the United States. So very powerful piece. Next one, please. Another view of the gallery, some of the works, and you can see it's a very diverse group of artists and works. Next. Some of the works are particularly feature images and objects that relate to Indigenous activism, especially around water issues like the Dakota Access Pipeline. This piece is a snow globe that was made by Ryan Feddersen. It's called Microspill, and in it, when you shake it, there's like a black kind of glittery substance that fills the snow globe, almost like a little miniature oil spill. Next. Another image of some of the works in the show, and some of which were made specifically for this show. Next. And this is, just want to call your attention to this really beautiful piece by Anita Fields that's called On Behalf of Water. She made this work specifically for the show. These are 7 glazed ceramic figures that are water protectors, and several of them hold remnants of fabric from tents that were left at Standing Rock in 2017. Next. And lastly, this is a work made specifically for this show by Courtney Leonard, an artist who is a member of the Shinnecock Nation and who's active in the offshore art movement, a very active environmental group. This work, Breach, is part of an ongoing series that investigates and documents Indigenous communities' ties to water and marine life and native subsistence. Her forms are inspired by Indigenous fish baskets, and she uses the idea of ceramics as a fragile material to speak to the fragility of our environment. And you can see that she actually incorporates oyster shells in this. And I think that this is partially because she's been very concerned about the loss of fishing grounds and farming grounds along the coast in Long Island, where near her nation. And so all of her work is really coming out of this concern. I'm going to end this part of the slideshow now, because we're really here to talk about Conscience Point. And I'd like to bring in our two speakers, Trevor Warmfeld, Becky Hildenia. Thank you for joining us this evening and for making such an inspiring and important film. I have quite a few questions myself, but I also want to make sure to include any questions that attendees have that you may share with us. I'll probably wait until I get through at least some of mine before we address them, but please feel free to jump in. So I'd just like to start, Treva, maybe by asking you how you came to make this film and how you first connected with Becky and what you initially hoped to accomplish in making the film.
Sure. I was out in, first, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really nice to be here, and that show looks incredible. I wish I could see it in person. I was out at the SUNY Stony Brook Southampton College campus in 2014 with my first film, Shepherd in Dark, and it was at that time that I was, through the grapevine, introduced to Becky. We were part of a sort of roundtable conversation where I was from Shinnecock members about some of the issues they're facing. Becky struck me immediately as somebody that had a lot to say and was very open and honest about everything. She invited me to her wave fire pit, which you see in the film, and really allowed me, she welcomed me in and was just incredibly forthright. And I said, "Can I film?" She said, "Yes." It was sort of, there was a connection there from the get-go where trust was developed, and I just immediately was struck by her and felt like she would be somebody I could potentially make a film about. So it's sort of, that was the starting point. And then, over the next few years, I was going back and forth between Los Angeles, where I live, and Shinnecock to try and capture the story. I didn't really know what the film would be in the beginning. Like most documentaries, you sort of, it's a meandering path in a way till you find out exactly what the arc will be. But she presented me with issues at first that mostly related to issues women in particular were facing on the reservation. And so for the first 2 years, I thought I was making a film about violence against women, actually. And then I followed her to town hall one day. She was going to go protest an issue of grave desecration and land preservation. And I met the co-producer, Charlie Certain, at town hall that day. He was Shinnecock, but worked for town hall, and told me he had been filming Becky for, decades, coming to town hall. And I said, "Oh my God, I got to see that material. That sounds amazing." And, he would send me, he would dig up in the archives all the appearances she had at town hall and send them to me. And then as soon as I saw that her activism was going back for so long, and that she never changed her story, it was always very focused. And I was able to kind of like connect the dots between some of the issues that Shinnecock on the reservation face with sort of larger issues of, social and economic injustices at large out there, and land theft and all of that. I was able to kind of figure out a more complex story in a way, but one that I felt like had greater resonance. And so I shifted my focus or enlarged it, well, more shifted it, because I started to realize that the violence against women focus wasn't really gonna work out. So in any case, it was a a process to find the story, and a lot of that didn't actually fully come to fruition until we were in the editing room, as often is the case. So but yeah, Becky was incredible. Sorry, I'm giving you a very long, incredible. And it was
no, actually, you're actually answering some of my other questions too, because I was going to ask you. I was so impressed with all of the footage of not only the fact that there was so much footage of Becky testifying over the years, but the consistency of her message and the way in which she delivered it so consistently. I thought, how did you? Like at first, I almost didn't realize that it was archival footage because it was all so cohesive, and it's a little sad to think of how long she had to beat the same drum or whatever. But I also think that you answered a question I was going to ask about how expectations change as it goes on. But I'm just wondering, and I should tell everyone, Becky's joining us by audio. So I would also like to hear from her what her initial expectations were regarding, agreeing to work on this film, because I was interested in how those expectations perhaps changed for both Becky and Treva. So Becky, what did you think going in?
Well, Treva came into my life like when I was really upset with the whole world and everything else. So she kind of, she pulled me in from off the cliff several times, because it was, it was a time in my life when I was starting to really wonder, where in the world is any of this going? What are we doing this all for? Because, thank goodness that Charlie Certain, was the man behind the curtain all those years. And I paid no attention to any of that. I can't ever remember being in those board meetings, thinking about the LTV and CTV things that Charlie Certain did. It was just like automatic. That's what he did, and that's what we did. We went in front of the board time after time after time. My Aunt Elizabeth and Chief Wallace from the Uncochog Nation and several other people from the reservation here, and another lawyer from the town of East Hampton who did so much pro bono work with us. His name was George Stankovich, and he was just an awesome individual. But all this time, we were drafting this legislation for graves protection and just saying the same thing over and over, and having mass burials desecrated while we're in the middle of drafting legislation. It was like really an insane time, in our lives, knowing that we keep on working on the same issues, and it's like not too many people really understand, although this is going on everywhere in indigenous country. I can call my friend out in South Dakota or Minnesota or any of them, and we're all saying the same thing. Oh yeah, we went to a protest today. Oh, this grave is, this cemetery is being desecrated by this developer. So we're all doing the same thing still. So that kind of makes you feel like, okay, just keep on trucking, So when people like Treva do come along and are able to have that outside looking in kind of view, it helps, because we're in so completely over our heads sometimes, that having someone with that perspective is really helpful. Because also at that time, I was going through a lot of, domestic violence situations here on the reservation that we're trying to get a handle on. And that was so difficult. So, so over the 5 years of making of the film and everything, there were several times when Trevor's like, okay, come on, we got to do this. Because I would be like, I'm done. What are we doing? I can't do this. Trevor's like, yes, we can. Come on now. Let's go. So I appreciate Treva more than words can say, because she was a trooper and she kept me going when times when I just wanted to throw my hands up. So, and we just kind of like, and she's the same age as my youngest daughter. So that helped a lot. She had that young, energetic, that amazing kind of energy that maybe I used to have way back in the day, but she had it, and it just helped so much in order to get the word out and to stick to the mission and accomplish some of the things that, my Aunt Elizabeth wanted to accomplish, and the others who have gone, on before us. One special guy is, his name was Mitag Hunter, and he was wonderful, and he's going on to the spirit world. There's so many who have come and gone since the making of the film. So we want to make sure that we carry on this mission, this work, this legacy of graves protection and land preservation.
Thank you. If it's any consolation to you, maybe it's a testimonial to both you and Treva that none of that comes through in the film. You just seem like a completely fierce and unstoppable, fervent person. I know that doesn't come without a price, and it's, there's probably a lot behind the surface, but bravo to both of you. So I'd love to talk a little bit about something that came up a little bit in what you just said. And that's the idea that I was thinking about throughout watching the film, is the twin ideas of preservation and erasure. Because I think that the unspoken part of any discussion about preservation has to be what's the opposite? So there's a whole history that we, what do we remember and what do we ignore, and what do we choose to remember or choose to ignore? And I think that when you're talking about a place like the Hamptons, where you have all these colonial sites and colonial graves and, colonial preservation, for one thing, it raises the question, are we preserving everything that we should be? And then what do we really mean by preservation? Are we preserving land because we want to keep open spaces, or we want to protect the land, or we want to protect graves, or are we preserving the land so that the people living next to it have pretty views? I mean, there are so many issues around that, and I wonder if either of you would like to speak a little bit to that.
So I'll let you speak, Becky. Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. If you don't mind, in the town proprietors, which they called themselves, since the 1600s, they came over here with a mission to take this land from the indigenous people. They had already done it in different places, and it seemed to be working, like for Columbus and others. So they came over here with that theory that, that's what they were going to do. And they had this money, and they had this bottles of alcohol in their hand, and they had this paper and pens. And so, what they immediately did here was, spread the disease. We had this epidemic of smallpox, yellow sweats, they called it. And so alcohol was introduced to us. Then this foreign language was introduced to us. So, and it was all about taking the land from the indigenous people, because in their minds, we didn't know what to do with land. It was just being wasted. So they had these ideas and a totally opposite way of life than we did. And so it was like fast and furious when they came here to colonize this place. And so you fast forward to, let's even fast forward to 1859, where so much land was already stolen from our people, and so many of our indigenous people had died already, because the Long Island, we were just all over Long Island. And then by the 1800s, way more than half of us were deceased through the disease and the relocation and the alcoholism and straight out killings. And so what happened was in 1859, when they were just, I guess, tired of picking at us in that way, it was like, okay, they have to be relocated to this 800 acres peninsula, which they called the Neck, which is the Shinnecock Reservation now, and get them off the hills, out of our way. We've had enough of these people, and that's what happened. So we got shoved onto this 800-acre peninsula, and it's a swamp, and we're surrounded by water. And they figured, and this is in black and white, most of what I tell you is documented. Like 99.9% of what I tell you can be proven with documentation. We were supposed to die off within 2 or 3 generations of swamp fever, because you can't really live in an area like this without getting sick. So between the alcoholism and the depression, oppression, tribal poverty, the racism, that all came with shoving us onto the Neck in 1859 to the present day. Obviously we are still here. We survived all of that, but they didn't like it, and they're still upset with us. And I believe the town of Southampton, they just perpetuate the racism and the hatred and everything handed down to them by their forefathers, who wanted every single inch of this land and wanted really no trace of the indigenous people. So that's why it was important for them to sever our ties with our ancestors, our land, our culture, our language, the heritage, by the land theft and the buildings, take away our lifestyle of wiki-ups and everything that we have, replace it with their kind of buildings, replace our clothing with their clothing. So, and like I said, it happens everywhere. So what we have to do these days is to preserve what's left. And we've given them every chance to do the right thing out around in the town of Southampton by telling them there's a great possibility that you will desecrate graves when you do all of this overdevelopment. It's polluting everything. It's destroying sacred places. The water is horrible. The animals have no place to live. So we've said all of that forever and ever. And so they still don't listen. But they have recently had to pay a little bit more attention to us. And I know part of it is because of the Conscience Point film and some of the other allies that we've, gotten in the last several years or so, who are helping us get our word out there that this is, and it's not just about us. It's not just about us. It's about, it's the bigger picture is, we have one planet, we have one Earth, and we all have to live here. And we cannot eat shellfish or fish or anything that comes out of a polluted bay. You can't pollute the oceans. Everything is getting really, over taxed, and it's not going to last that long. So can you please do the right thing by preserving land and stop desecrating our graves. So, you know, like we said, it's the same message over and over and over and over again. And, you know, as far as, and so the billionaires who play golf on stolen land and desecrated graves of Shinnecock ancestors, you know, it's cruel. It's an absolute vile history. And we have to remind them that we haven't forgotten about any of this. Maybe it seems like we have, but we haven't. And we are going to continue on letting these billionaires know that, you know, there's still justice at the end of this tunnel, and we're going to make sure that there is justice for our sacred ancestors and their the remains that were dug up so that they could play golf and drink their martinis on stolen land and desecrated graves. So yeah, we have a lot more work to do.
Thank you. Oh.
Let me see. I just wanted to add to that, you know, when I first heard about the Community Preservation Fund, which is a very large fund that is generated by a 2% land transfer tax. So anyone that purchases land has to pay 2% of the asking price into this fund, which is out there a substantial amount of money. And when I heard that that was there to not only preserve land most of the time for views, as you were saying, but also they're fully aware of the water issues, but their concern is not how the Shinnecock are impacted. Their concern is, of course, how everybody else that surrounds the Shinnecock are impacted. And they figured out how to dedicate part of the Community Preservation Fund money to water quality issues, which meant updating antiquated septic systems in houses where I'm sure many people living in them can fully afford to update their own septic systems. But they had no percentage of this fund that went towards preserving Shinnecock history, no percentage that went towards helping Shinnecock, the waters surrounding the Shinnecock or Shinnecock homes, or there was absolutely nothing going towards the Shinnecock. And when I figured like this out, which, you know, was relatively quickly once I started digging in, it just seemed so appalling to me. And that was part of what I wanted to bring to people's attention with the film, was that, you know, there is this turning a blind eye to, as Becky's talking about, turning a blind eye to this egregious history, but while kind of like suggesting that they are concerned about the future, which, you know, it's very hard to reconcile once you connect these dots. And so, you know, I think, you know, ideally, you know, I mean, Becky's activism has led to some important legislation being passed since the film came out. But, you know, there still is no percentage of this fund going towards the Shinnecock, you know, which, not to mention the back-owed rent of the stolen land.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just so much going on here when it comes to erasure. You know, it's endless, and the repercussions are endless on the Shinnecock. And so it's, you know, it's a very disturbing situation once you, and it's not, and it hasn't stopped. So
I was shocked because in the course of the film, when I saw that there was this fund, my initial thought was, when the man building the home uncovered human remains, I thought, oh, well, great. Why don't they just use the money from this fund to purchase that land, since it's obviously they're you know, sacred ground. And I was like shocked. And then they're raising money at the powwow to get donations to buy it. I'm like, what's with that fund? I mean, it's a little bit shocking.
the issue is that the assessed value of the land was different than what the homeowner had spent. And so
Right.
he wasn't going to sell for the assessed value of the land alone. He wanted to make back everything he had spent. And so the Shinnecock had to make up the difference, which again is ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
why can't they spend millions of dollars?
I know.
You know, and since then, the Peconic Land Trust, which is a separate fund out there, has stepped up and done more. But and I think maybe Becky, did the Peconic Land Trust help with that with that land purchase in 2018? Or no, I can't remember.
I think they did something. I think that them being kind of a watchdog at that point, their lawyers helped with some paperwork and stuff. So, but of course, since then they have really stepped up a whole lot more than that. But I think during that one incident, they were just, you know, the town was aware of the Peconic Land Trust involvement to a certain degree, and they couldn't get away with a whole lot because you know how it got pretty hairy there for a while.
Yeah.
We didn't have any faith that the town was going to, you know, do the right thing and just, I mean, they could have outright purchased it in 2 seconds flat, no problem, you know, with their eyes closed.
Yeah.
It could have been done so smoothly and easily, but they made us suffer for that. So, yeah, Peconic Land Trust was a witness to all of that too.
Yeah.
And, you know, Treva, thinking about this issue of land and views and all that thing, one of the things that struck me about the film, and I thought this was really subtle but kind of genius, was the juxtaposition of the different kinds of views. So often there'd be a voiceover, maybe Becky talking about the land, and then you'd have an image of this beautiful land that is sullied by all of these, like, it's almost overwhelming, the size and the amount of these mansions. So, and when you keep seeing them, scene after scene after scene, they stop looking like gorgeous homes and they just start to look like, what are these things doing on all of this land? And thinking about the idea of view. So I think that one of the things that is so appealing to people who want to live in the Hamptons, who buy those multi-million-dollar homes, is the idea that they have a beautiful view. But that's not what we saw in your film. What we saw in your film was the view that everyone else sees of their homes and on this land. And I thought that was really a very, very interesting approach. I'm sure you had lots of strategies, but
Well,
I just thought.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I certainly didn't feel like a neutral party in the matter. Like, I felt very much aligned with Becky's activism making the film. So I tried to.
But you were pretty even-handed with that developer. I mean, I give you credit. Like,
well, I wanted to share his point of view so that people understood what what the thinking is. You know, he says, well, you know, my kids deserve a house in the Hamptons, the house, pool, and tennis. You know, like from someone like that who has that mentality. He doesn't see the sort of the lack of sustainability issue. You know, he just sees it as like, well, my kids and their kids and their kids need, you know, deserve this just as much as I do. You know, I think Becky and you know, traditional native approach to thinking about land is obviously much more sustainable. And so, you know, when Becky says, I'm speaking for the animals, the people, the animals, the land, they don't have a voice. They need someone to speak for them. You know, that to me is very powerful. That's sort of like up against the developer. You know, the developer is speaking for his great grandkids who want the house, pool, and tennis. And here's Becky saying, you know, the land's doesn't have a voice to say, hey, don't develop me because, you know, for whatever reasons, you know. So I felt like I wanted to show the opposite view, just so that we could understand sort of the full picture. But yeah, I mean, my point of view changed drastically while making it. I didn't really have as clear an understanding before making this film of how in your face colonial history is, and sort of the flip side of that coin, as you were suggesting, and how important it is to make sure that we give attention to the Indigenous history the way we do colonial history. You know, it's just so baked into our sense of our country, and it's so problematic. You know, and I made the film before this amazing year of Black Lives Matter and understanding, you know, the reckoning that we all need to have, and I think it's just so important. So I hope we come through all of this with just, you know, a much deeper appreciation for the history that came before, the people that came before, and try and make right, because it hasn't happened yet. You know, this film is just a tiny blip on that, you know, effort. But
that brings me to something that I thought one of the most arresting scenes in the film for me was the one in which Shinnecock members are alongside the road engaging in a protest, and a woman stops and gets out. And I know that, you know, when you're making a documentary, you make a lot of film that doesn't end up in the movie. But I just thought that was such an interesting interaction, because it was so nuanced. It wasn't black and white. It was this woman who, like many of us, is interested, and she wants to be an ally, or so she projects. And she says, you know, I'm with you, but then she gets back in her car. I was just, and Becky's interaction with her in that was polite, but Becky wasn't going to sugarcoat it at all. She told it like it was. So I would just love to hear from both of you if you have any thoughts about that scene and the larger implications for those of us who are not Indigenous and think, oh yeah, of course we support this, we want to help, but really, how can we not just say I'm with you? Anyway,
I'll say one thing and then I'll let Becky.
Yeah.
But I'll say one thing, which was that scene made me incredibly uncomfortable, but I knew I had to include it. You know, there was no way I could not include that. So, but I'll let Becky, I would love to hear.
It was and I think that's what was so compelling about it was like a little bit cringy, but it was just so compelling because it was, the awkwardness it's pervasive in so many ways. So I'd love to hear Becky talk about that.
Well, she came back later and got out of her car again and handed one of the girls a $10 bill and said, here's my contribution. I that's all I have on me right now. So, you know, good luck with everything. You know, to me, it's so typical behavior, such typical behavior. You know, I don't know what she went up the road to her friends and said. I saw a bunch of Indians on the side of the road and I talked to them for a couple of minutes. And so where are we going partying tonight? You know, so I don't think that she gave two hoots of a thought after she left us for another, you know, 5 minutes worth of thought. And that's such typical behavior. And then I'm not saying all people are like that, but most people are, especially out here. They come here, you know, to get drunk, to get high, to spend money, to rub elbows with celebrities or their superstars themselves, and really could care less. So I believe that this is what the awareness is all about. And I truly believe that the universe is putting people in our pathway, good people. Recently, Roger Waters of Pink Floyd has, been instrumental in helping us in preserving one of the most sacred places in our ancestral territory called Sugarloaf Hill. So although there are many, many, many people who really don't care about anything, except their Porsche or whatever they're driving, and I hate to put people down like that, but it's just so sickening that there's such an imbalance around here. And even though there is this imbalance in, maybe as far as money is concerned, I don't think anybody should be poor. I don't think anybody should go hungry or homeless. That's just like the craziest thing in our culture. And we were never like that. No one was hungry or poor. There was no such thing. In tribal living, we used to take care of each other. So all of this colonial influence has taken a huge toll on our tribe and our families. And, when we live next to billionaires, like I said, who just golf on our desecrated graves and they build their mansions on stolen land and everything. And here we sit in the swamp. We are suffering with these respiratory illnesses, living in shanties with rats and mold. And it's like, nobody gives a shit. And I don't understand this imbalance. I don't understand it. It's not like something I can comprehend that well. Is like, how can they do this? How can they have such a rotten history of stealing land and doing all these vile and, dehumanizing the indigenous people and all of this horrible history? And then but you know what? I'm getting ready to write another letter to them and letting them know, your joyride is over. We've had it. We can't take this anymore. We can't pass this on to our children. I don't want to hate anybody. I want some of this to start healing pretty soon. So I can't, I do not want to pass this down to my grandchildren and great grandchildren in this manner. We have to figure out some kind of way to heal. And like I said, we all have to share this land and this planet. So we have to figure something out very soon. And if it, like they say, you got to crack a couple of eggs to make an omelet, then, that's what we're going to have to do. And I think that's what we've been doing, and we'll continue on doing it. And we will get our allies together and our forces together. And it's a good army. And I love these people who have the heart to save the land and to preserve graves and sacred places. And we're finding each other, and it's a really good feeling. And I really do think that Conscience Point had so much to do with a lot of this healing that is going on, and we're looking for more of it.
That was one of the things that I was curious about, the effect that the film had both for Native audiences and non-Native audiences, and if that was different. What impact did it have in your community, Becky and Treva? Did you see it having an impact in the broader community at large, out in the Hamptons?
Becky, do you want to answer about the Shinnecock's take on the film?
For the most part, people saw the film, especially when it first came out. A lot were just curious, what's this all about? And, it's unbelievable, but I don't think anyone had a negative thing to say about it. Kind of like took everyone by surprise, because there's a lot of history in our small community of what we shouldn't do or shouldn't say or shouldn't go there or can't do this and can't do that. So when this film was made, and released, it kind of caught a lot of people off guard. But, miraculously, I don't remember anyone having a negative thing to say about it. Maybe they didn't say wonderful things, praise it or whatever, or didn't say, like my grandmother used to say, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So, but the people who did have something to say did not have anything negative to say. So that was like really amazing in my little Shinnecock world here.
I mean, I can echo that. I mean, just at the Hamptons premiere, when there was so many Shinnecock that showed up, that was very, it's just very moving and meaningful. People were coming up to me afterwards saying thank you for, telling the Shinnecock story, in this way, which they hadn't seen before in quite the same way. So that was really amazing. The broader, the town board and I never heard anything from the developer.
He's probably still developing.
Joe Farrell. Yeah. But Jay Schneiderman came to the premiere, and I think it caught him off guard as well. And I think he was taken aback by how the film really held his feet to the fire on some of these issues, and he I think tried to make right after the fact, but it's and not he's still the town supervisor, and there's more he could do. So but yeah, he I think kind of reflected some of the ways I felt the broader community felt, in the sense that it was it took them up short a bit, in the sense of not really understanding what they hadn't been fully conscious of what they had been doing to perpetuate some of these problems, and kind of and I think it's not an easy thing to swallow. So they were kind of trying to figure out, some people were trying to figure out what they could do to help, and what they could do to support the Shinnecock directly. And there was that was great. And then like Becky said, there was just certainly a lot of silent folks too. I didn't feel like I got a general overarching sense of like how a mass amount of people felt. But the Hamptons Film Festival showing it and awarding it the Social Justice Award was very meaningful, and I think sent a message. And then it being on PBS was fantastic, and reaching a broader audience. We when we were told what the viewership was like of the broadcast, it really hit hard in indigenous territories. So like our largest audience was in Oklahoma and in parts of California and North Dakota, and like it just felt like we were all over the place. But it was kind of interesting to see where the most people watched it. So that was cool.
Yeah, the something that I saw in an interview, Treva, that you had done, you said that you think that the Shinnecock and Native Americans at large need to be at the front and center in any conversations about the environment, because they have lived for thousands of years without having a negative impact on the land. And I was struck by that, and I'm wondering, because I agree, and I'm wondering if maybe we're starting to listen a little bit more. I don't know. I'd love to hear from Becky. Do you think that the public is ready to hear Native people speak about the environment, with Indigenous people representing a very small percentage of our overall population? They seem to make up a proportionately larger segment of those people who are actively working on behalf of the environment. That doesn't seem quite fair, but I'm just wondering how generous you can afford to be about that, or is it difficult to all of a sudden people maybe are going to listen and look to you for wisdom? Is that even true?
I think that I know that, we are told that Indigenous people have to lead the way. So, and other people will already have the heart for the land. A lot of times they just don't know what to do. They don't feel like they have the right to do certain things. It kind of gets a little weird, but we as Indigenous people have got to take that leadership position and get, up off our reservations and make sure that these, environmental people know, yes, you're doing the right thing, and we have to join these forces. And like I said, making these alliances is so critical at this point, to work together, like-minded people, put it all together, interracial, intertribal, everything. It's all for the same purpose, for the same reason. It's almost like, you got to fight the greedy developer, billionaire attitude folks who really don't care about anything, with the people who do care about the earth and the levels of pollution that are going to choke us to death and we'll have nothing. And why? Why would you destroy something so sacred and magnificent and divine as this planet? But, for greed and profit. So the more people who realize what's going on, it's wonderful, but Indigenous people, I believe, and we were told, have to lead the way. So this is a call to all Indigenous people out there already, because I hear you calling to us out here in the Hamptons, where it's been, people think everything's fine and dandy out here in Southampton and nothing is wrong. Well, it is wrong. It's wrong all over the place. These folks have polluted everything in sight. We have to clean up the bays and the oceans and the groundwater. Everything's got to be cleaned up, and we've got to do this together. So that's it. Indigenous people, yes, we can lead the way, but we need each other. The scientists, the children in the elementary schools who draw those pictures, a clean earth, everything. We can't ever stop until this mission is complete. And we figured this mess out in the sane fashion, but togetherness is what's going to work for us.
Thank you, Becky. That's, you really said it. But I was thinking, you've been such a courageous fighter, both for Indigenous rights and environmental justice. And as obviously in the statement you just made, but I'm just wondering, how have you been able to do it at the level and length of time that you've been doing it? What is it that sustains you and enables you to go on with this?
Well, I hate to sound corny or anything, but, I answer to the great creator. And these children that I talk about all the time, we've been through so much insanity on this little tiny reservation with, my children and everything. But having grandchildren and great grandchildren, there's just no way you can just shirk your responsibilities. And Treva can tell you, when she was over here, she'd see us getting up in the morning. There'd be kids all over the place, all over the house and everything. But that's my life, and they're my motivation. And they just make me feel like, yep, Gam's doing the right thing, and keep going, Gammy. So they're my whole world, and that's who inspires me.
Well, thank you so much for all you've done for them and for us, and thank you, Treva, as well. I didn't have a chance to ask you, but let me quickly ask you about the title of the film. Like, what a perfect title. I mean, was that obvious? Like, oh, it has to be Conscience Point, or because it's a little bit ironic too, that the point where the settlers first came is actually, how did it get to be called Conscience Point? And wow.
I know. I mean, I did feel like when I learned that was the name of the point of land where the Europeans first landed, that needed to be the title. But it is bizarre because obviously it sort of takes up a different meaning. My understanding of why it was that, one historian told me that it was when they were on the boats coming in, they said, for conscience sake, there's land, and then that became the name of the point of land, but a Shinnecock fellow said that it was named Conscience Point, I think, because of the the need to be conscious greeting the Shinnecock, but I'm not sure that that's accurate. I think that the historian maybe, I think that was more wishful thinking and sort of like what it should mean now. But yeah, there's not really a lot of clarity on how it got that name, but it is really remarkable in a way that was the title. And I felt that like in the environmental message, that it made sense, because I think that's kind of where we're at now, that we're at that point in time. It's sort of like now or never.
It's a point of conscience now, definitely.
Yeah. So
I think we may be at the end of our time.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yes, thanks everyone so much. We are towards the end of our time. I just want to point out a few things that happened in the chat. One question was posed by Lisa: has the film been made available for classrooms across the country? And Treva wrote the information in there that it is available for classrooms. It would be a great film to show in schools. It's through their distributor, Women Make Movies, and they can set up online screening, and the link for that is in the chat too. So I think, one of the things Mary and I have talked about a lot is this opportunity for education around these issues, and this film certainly would just do nothing but support that.
And Trevor, what are you working on next?
I wish I had clarity on that. I have a few things in the pipeline, but as Becky knows, I have a 1.5-year-old, so I'm kind of got my hands full. And a 6-year-old. Yeah. So it's it's harder to travel when you have a 2. Yeah. I was traveling with the 1 back and forth pretty easily, but with 2, it's a little bit more complicated. Yeah. So trying to figure that out, looking for more LA-based work.
Well, keep us posted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This
and Becky, we'd love to hear from you too. Let's definitely stay in touch and hear what's going on in your world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing this. We really appreciate it.